Hello, today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2019. This is Standard Cluster API office hours. We'll just get started with the agenda. David, it looks like you have the first item on the list.
Yeah. Daniel.
Daniel, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions yesterday about, the infrastructure and Bootstrap providers, how they would, how multiple providers would run on the same namespace, or multiple sort of objects from multiple clusters would get reconciled in the same namespace. And I reached out to Vince on Slack, and I thought, well, it would be nice to record this somewhere, at least in the interim, and it may be something that we would want to think about for like added as requirements to conformance for these infrastructure and Bootstrap providers. And so, yeah, I just jotted it down in an issue. Just wanted to share that. I hope I'm not jumping the gun. I mean, we're not really far enough along to like talk about conformance. We're just working on implementing the first ones, but just thought I'd jot it down because I couldn't find a place. I thought maybe add it to the book, but then I realized that the book is really V1 Alpha 1, and this is more for V1 Alpha 2. And that kind of leads into the second question. Is anybody working on V1 Alpha 2 book revision?
So I think Chuck had a question before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah, on the documenting requirements, when I was implementing the Docker provider, I found that there were a bunch of assumptions that were not documented anywhere. So I just wanted to +1 this, and I would be happy to help write this. I don't know if I have time to do the entire thing myself, but I'd be happy to like pick out the things that I made, or the assumptions that I found in the cluster API code that are not necessarily documented anywhere, both for V1 Alpha 1 and V1 Alpha 2.
Okay, yeah, we could maybe we tack that onto that issue, and if there are things for V1 Alpha 1, I'd be happy to maybe get them into the book, the current revision of the book.
Yeah, it seems reasonable.
Your second topic was question.
Yeah, anybody working on the because we have a section on building a provider, but it's specifically for V1 Alpha 1. V1 Alpha 2 looks quite a bit different. Anybody working on that? Is it too early, or do we maybe want to just start kind of building the scaffolding for that as we're implementing?
Jason?
Yep. So the blocker here right now is that we need to modify the Netlify config to be able to do per branch subdomains. And I'm waiting for David to get back to find out whether he has access to that so that we can get that federated out to additional people and make the changes needed, or if he was coordinating with somebody else on the Netlify config, and then we can document that. Once we have that, we just need to drop a separate Netlify config in for the release 0.1 branch that can then become the V1 Alpha 1 version of the book. And then we can have master just be the latest updates for tracking master. And then when we do fork V1 Alpha 2, we can handle that the same way that we have V1 Alpha 1.
My question would be, is the detail of this logged in an issue?
I'm not sure. I know I've discussed this with Vince and others in the past. If not, I will double check and make sure that we have an issue and get it tracked.
Okay, sounds great. Any other questions there? Comments? People want to work on it? If Bueller.
Well, I was planning on helping at least with the infrastructure requirements for it. I can definitely use some help on the content, and I will probably be roping in Vince to help out with that since he's been driving a lot of the V1 Alpha 2 work.
Okay, Vince, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, I mean, just in order, just spoke for me. Yeah, I was offering my help for V1 Alpha 2.
You're also up next, so you can probably just keep going.
Yeah, so for the release 01 branch, open a PR to add Go module support, and this is just to ease a little bit the development process between V1 Alpha 2 and V1 Alpha 1, and especially backporting patches. This adds in module support, but it doesn't remove the Go package.log and TOML files to just like be backward compatible. And on that, like the next item is the backporting patches guidelines. So I added this section to the contributing guide, which like the documents that we actually ship older versions. And like if we want to backport, the backports are reserved for critical bug fixes only, and features should be like really the exception and not the rule. And added like also like a note that like if there is both modules in depth to update both.
Any questions there? Going once, twice, 3 times. So 2 people, Ashish and Ridio, kickoff meeting for Kubernetes Bootstrap provider.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we were just discussing yesterday about the possibility for building a backlog for the KubeADM Bootstrap provider specifically, just because I was trying to find something to work on there, and the issues, there were just a few like small doc issues open at the time, nothing really focused on implementation or anything. So we thought maybe it'd be a good idea to have like a kickoff or some sort of planning meeting around that.
Chuck?
Yeah, so I added a few issues yesterday. I think you saw those. But as far as the planning meeting goes, we kind of have the plan outlined in the V1 Alpha 2 Bootstrap provider doc. And I think we're just trying to keep it to what was outlined in the document. And once we sort of see the implementation there, maybe we can start to talk about a further plan after that. But we have the issues open for what kind of like the minimum thing we're going for is right now. But if you think it would be helpful to meet, then we can definitely still talk about that.
No, we brought this up before there were any issues, and I kind of reread the doc and stuff like that, and I think following the doc to spec is a perfectly good plan.
Do you think that we should have is it time maybe to make a Slack channel for this so we can sort of discuss there more freely than in Cluster API, or are we still okay with Cluster API? I don't know if this is related or not, but
I would prefer to keep it in Cluster API. We already have so many Slack channels. That's my personal opinion, because like in the fullness of time, this should be, it would probably reduce to a smaller set of people, and it would just be used as a common component across providers.
I didn't know if it would help with planning and all that. Maybe we don't want to jump all the way to the end state before we sort of build it out, but it doesn't really matter to me.
Any other questions?
Is there a label or something to find out the issue related to the Bootstrap provider?
There's a whole repo and a proposal.
So they are inside. They moved to separate repo.
Yep. So you can, Fabrizio, you can probably sync with Chuck on details there.
Yes, definitely.
Any other questions? Going once, twice, 3 times. Pablo.
Hi, just to announce for that there is a proposal for an open issue for some time ago that externalizing what is now the provider-specific specs and the state as an external CRD or CRDs. It already have some feedback. Thanks for the people who has take time and give feedback. So far, there seems not to be any contentious point, except maybe at some point decided we are making this reference mandatory or optional, because that may probably affect a lot of the rest of the proposal of the design. But the rest are mostly things that can be handled easily. I will probably submit an update by Friday. Probably sooner than that, because the changes are not that big. And then I will work on translating these sequence diagrams I wrote in ASCII art to proper SQL diagram. That was a shortcut. I will do that over the weekend. So I'm sorry, I don't believe I will have time before that. And that is, any comment is welcome.
Andy, your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together, Pablo. I will echo and encourage everybody who's interested to please read this and provide feedback. It would be fantastic if we could get this approved and start implementing it and include it in V1 Alpha 2, because then we'd have cluster and machine looking similar instead of clusters with inline provider specs the way that they are in V1 Alpha 1 and machines with object references. So I agree. I don't think this is going to be too controversial. So please take a look.
I think my request is usually typical that you hear from me over and over again. Usually when we have a proposal, once the proposal has been agreed upon, or even if there's non-controversial pieces, is to create some issue that breaks down the work items that are being required, so that way people who want to help along have an idea of how they can help contribute there. So maybe pre or post proposal, it's up to you to determine, Pablo, but that would be helpful in case you wanted other people to chime in and to help along the way.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great. Next up, Andy, face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, so we talked about this last week, but we didn't have a big crowd because of the holiday. So I sent a message to the SIG Cluster Lifecycle mailing list late yesterday afternoon and wanted to bring it up again today. We are interested in putting together a face-to-face to do planning and design for V1 Alpha 3 or whatever comes after V1 Alpha 2. And we're thinking that this probably would be sometime in September. I do plan on sending out a poll once I get it put together to try and solicit feedback for dates and availability. I also need to put together either a spreadsheet or document to keep track of who thinks that they'll plan on attending, or we'll get that information from the poll. We can host it potentially in a VMware office, or if there's other locations that people are interested in, it doesn't have to be. So I mentioned in the email, we potentially could do Bellevue in Washington State. We could do Palo Alto or the Bay Area in San Francisco. There may be some other places as well, but please look for emails with polls and whatnot over the next couple of days and respond if you're interested. I think I saw Pablo's hand go up first. Pablo?
Yeah, brief question. As for EMEA, it's hard to attend overseas meeting like this one. It's not related to a conference or something that we can somehow justify the budget. If there will be any possibility to do some a lot of remote participation for plenary sessions, like opening and closing sessions, probably just by video or something like that. I understand that not all the working session make no sense, but at least beginning and end of the meeting, or at least recording for that.
Yeah, I think we were talking with George, and I think he had mentioned trying to do Zoom. I think the details we'll probably need to figure them out.
Okay, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
And I know that I certainly appreciate that we all live in different places, and we're going to try and do US for this round, but if it goes well and we want to try and put together another one, maybe we'll do Europe or some other region for a follow-up.
Michael, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I was going to say if we could get a formalized document about what this meeting's about so I could send it to the management types. I'm sure that'd be helpful for a lot of people to justify going.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for the feedback.
All right, Nick, are there any questions there? If not, we can probably go to mailing list and ask the questions on the invite. Daniel, you have the next topic.
Yeah, I saw on the mailing list a proposal for the Azure provider to use the auto scaling service that Azure provides, and anyway, it's just we've kind of talked about this before. You know, having or the idea of auto scaling. You know, whether Cluster API, you know, will work somehow with, you know, the current project, which is like Cluster Autoscaler, whether we're going to like fold in that functionality. In general, it seems like it's kind of common functionality that everybody, you know, regardless of infrastructure, would want. But every infrastructure has a slightly different auto scaling service. So anyway, I just wanted to, you know,
so I've been,
that, yeah.
I've been remarkably consistent with this over time, is that it's not necessarily a feature of Cluster API proper, but that doesn't mean that external autoscalers can't use the features inside of Cluster API. So it's a consumption model where autoscalers could use the features in Cluster API versus Cluster API having that within its capabilities. Jason, you have your hand raised.
So this is a slight distinction. This is less about an external autoscaler, and this is more about Cluster API interacting with native scaling groups that are provided by the cloud providers.
Oh, you mean like autoscaling groups?
Yep, ASGs, VMSS is the Azure equivalent.
Yeah, we need to change that text then. It looks like Justin, you had your hand raised, then Michael.
I actually, Michael was first, but.
Okay, Michael, whatever.
Sure. Well, I added a note there for the Cluster Autoscaler. OpenShift's been utilizing Cluster API to scale machine sets, so that might be generally interesting to people here, and it would also be helpful for, I think, everyone. Get more feedback on that PR and jump on that bandwagon, because Cluster Autoscaler, I don't know if they're quite convinced on that particular use case, but I would also add a comment as far as the cloud provider specific stuff. In this case, I would rather see this be a separate provider for Azure rather than trying to have one large convoluted thing with a bunch of options to do this or not do this. But ultimately, creating a new provider should be really trivial. And if somebody else has worked out the steps to make all this work, then it should be very easy to implement.
I'm losing track of trying to keep notes and go, but I saw Ace's hand raised, lower raised, so I'm going to say Ace.
Yes, I guess a couple things. Yeah, I think it is just about using the infrastructure. And so I mean, doing a separate provider is definitely possible. I think right now it's a little bit tricky, but if we have like that decomposition between infrastructure and bootstrapping, that's maybe one way that we could achieve this in a slightly more like clean way across providers. I do think, to Daniel's point in the doc though, right, this should be kind of consistent across providers and kind of Kubernetes aware. I think it's less about auto scaling using those necessarily. I know for Azure specifically, there are just some features of VMSS over individual VMs that make them a little bit easier to manage at the infrastructure level.
Yeah, I think there's a confusion. I think the wording here, it's clear to me that the wording here confused me, and it also hit Michael, the same topic.
I think for Michael though, like I think everyone would definitely want Cluster API aware, like auto scaling on top of this. It wouldn't be at the infrastructure level, just to be super clear about that.
Yeah. Andy, then Justin.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that we need to split these into two separate topics.
Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I have also been consistent on this, which is we can't stop anyone from building providers that implement other APIs, but I think we can give them fair warning that they have to be entirely conformant with a to be determined conformance test. So we want like machine sets to behave consistently across all providers. At some stage in the future, we will likely have a test, and it will be hard. It is a lot of work to implement the exact same behavior on top of a cloud API, which doesn't necessarily expose all the same knobs that we will likely exploit, so that we can be like more Kubernetes aware. It's sort of the same challenges with not meaning to conflate the issue with autoscaler being aware of like unscheduled pods, right? That's why cluster autoscaler is different from like a sort of autoscaling group, which is a horrible example because it just conflates everything again. But I would very much caution anyone doing this that at some stage I would hope we have a conformance test, and it is going to be hard to write something that conforms to a future conformance test.
Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have said this earlier. So I do think that I totally agree, Justin. I don't know that that the solution of using something like a VMSS or an ASG is possible unless we adjust cluster API to expect that they are there. And so that potentially could mean modifying machine sets to support either machine-based or auto-scaling group, VMSS, whatever it's called, based scaling, or creating a parallel machine set-like resource that is specifically for scaled groups of machines provided by cloud providers. And I think that's just TBD.
Craig, then Justin.
So, this is Craig from Microsoft, and within my team where this VMSS proposal comes, we definitely want to do this in a way that's consistent both with the cluster autoscaler and with the cluster API. Back to Justin's point, we'd love to be a part of figuring out what conformance looks like and do that at the same time together. I just don't know at this time the timing is just bad or what. We need this capability for our customers, and that's driving the motivation to get it done now.
Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I guess I would say like I don't think we're obligated to support every functionality of every underlying cloud. So if we can deliver the same user functionality without using MIGs, without using autoscaling groups, without using VMSS, then I think we will be in better shape. If there is functionality that can only be delivered through VMSS, I think that's an interesting discussion. And like, why is that functionality available through VMSS? But I would personally prefer to see us invest in not MIGs on GCE, not ASGs on AWS, and not VMSS on Azure, and rather the underlying direct-to-machine functionality.
I guess we'll have to take that offline. That's a very important discussion.
Exactly. I think you just opened Pandora's box there. So what I was going to say is, why don't we table this discussion and follow up for next week for people to have reviewed the proposal, which I have not at all. And if folks can have comments and feedback, maybe we could have a more informed discussion and hopefully deduplicate the overlap in naming. Next up, Jason, 015 release.
Yes, so we've had a few changes that have been backported to the release 0.1 branch, and we're also being asked to help guinea pig the image promoter process that the K-Infra group has been working on. So because of that, I want to go ahead and try to cut a 0.1.5 release either today or tomorrow. So I wanted to see if there were any additional backports or anything that anybody feels is a necessary change that we need to get in before that release is cut.
Just out of curiosity, because you find this to be remarkably consistent, is there a issue relating to this?
There's an issue for guinea pigging the image promoter. And I can go ahead and link that in the docs, but there isn't one specifically for v0.1.5, but I can create a tracking issue for that too.
Yeah, I think it might be easier for people who might not even be able to attend the meeting, just that they view the repository as the canonical source of truth. So if there's going to be a release coming up and people want to chime in, the repository becomes the means by which they can communicate. This is especially true for China.
Sounds good.
Next up, Vince, V1 Alpha 2 status update.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an update on like the V1 Alpha 2 progress. All controllers logic, machine set, machine deployment has been implemented. And as others have mentioned, there have been some changes like in the kind of contract, which have been put like in the proposal, but we need like a more extensive documentation. That we have done like a lot of progress also like on tests. A lot of tests were actually commented out before in V1 Alpha 1. So like now we actually have like proper tests running and like in the reconciliation loops, etc. And if anyone wants to work with myself and others like on documentation, please reach out. I was thinking to do a code walkthrough on July 16th during the office hours. And is anybody interested, or like should we do it like later? Any thoughts around that?
Any questions, comments, complaints, concerns there? Going once, twice, 3 times. Great. Next up is the continual triage. Are there any, before I get into that, because it's usually the last thing we do, are there any other group topics that folks wanted to discuss? I'll say it slowly. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right, so what new funsies have occurred in the last week or so? We had talked about this one last time. I did think that we do need to decide on documentation versioning scheme.
Yeah, this is just for having multiple, like we already talked about this, the multiple document sites.
Oh, for V1 Alpha 2. Are we planning to do this for this release cycle? I think we kind of have to.
Yes, I'm happy. I'm already assigned to it, so yes, we do.
Changes to Gitbook business model that may affect the project. This is the one that Pierce filed. Any comments here? Do we have to switch now?
We've been kicking the can down the road so far. I don't necessarily mind kicking it a little bit further down the road.
Is it time for Kitbook? The Kubernetes fork?
I don't know if I'm horrified or if it's comical, but we do this way too much. Did I accidentally close my other tab? I think I did. Let me just go back here. Sorry about that. I close tabs all the time just because I have too many tabs. Document requirements for conformant infrastructure bootstrap providers. I think this is long-term, maybe even backlog. I do think that once we hit, what is a comment we want to make about guarantees? Typically for GA, absolutely. For beta, maybe. Are there any thoughts there?
It'd be good to have something as a guide, for anyone that's creating or updating a provider for V1 Alpha 2, even if it's not set in stone.
I'll leave it as help wanted. It's still in the next category. It's like a non-blocker. So if folks can get to it, that'd be helpful. If you are interested in helping out, please, patch is welcome. Machine cluster reference should be required.
I opened this mostly as a tracking issue. We have a lot of code today that checks when the cluster ref is actually set, and this has caused a lot of development issues. Now all providers have to check when the reference is actually not nil and fail if it is. Also, the user experience is not great because if you miss the label, there's no validation on it, and so it will just say yeah, I got a machine, but I don't have a cluster, so I can't do much with it. And another thing that I wanted to point out is machines and machine deployment are actually broken if you don't use the cluster, given that the node ref cannot be set, and if you are running the controllers in a management cluster. So I would love to kind of solve this in V1 Alpha 2 and make the cluster object as thin as possible, and this is mostly related with Pablo's proposal. So if that goes through and the infrastructure is optional, then the cluster could be required on a machine, and all of these issues will go away.
Does anyone want to volunteer to work on this one? Pablo or Andy?
I mean, it can be implemented, but I don't know that everybody agrees with it. So how do you want to handle that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, actually, just to show a bit, I remember this is probably been the most contentious point I remember since I joined the Cluster API, truly. I agree with Vince, but as Andy said, it's something that every time the topic comes, you're like, well, I don't know why, because I it's probably because what it implies to having the cluster, probably will clarify that, the cluster object.
Okay, I'll leave it as help wanted for right now. Leave it within the V1 Alpha mode milestone. We can always boot it out as marked as long-term important, so that's equivalent to P2.
Well, I'm curious how we resolve it, because I know, for example, I think Andrew from Linode, if I remember correctly, doesn't want to have the cluster required. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but there's at least people out there who don't want it. So
I want to specifically table this conversation, in part because until we have Pablo's proposal in place, like the thin wrapper, as well as a more discrete set of well-defined states for bootstrapping, similar to the machine's proposal, I think that will help to clarify its use case. Otherwise, the current state it's fair to say that you'd want them separated, but I think the long-term state has not been fully vetted, and that we could potentially get into a contentious topic there that could never end. So I'll leave it open as help wanted, and we can come back to it. I think for the time being, focusing on Pablo's current proposal is a good first step. Is that a fair statement?
Okay.
Right. This one, Jason, I'm just going to let you deal with this because you're going to close this out before the release timeframe, but that could signal to external people.
Sounds good.
It looks like everything else is already been labeled. Are there any other questions, comments, complaints, concerns you want to talk about? If not, we get a whopping 23 minutes back. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Thanks, everybody.